The following edition of Connecticut Valley Views is made possible by Windsor Federal Savings, with offices in Windsor, Granby, and Bloomfield. Neighbors helping neighbors since 1936. Hello, I'm Susan Regan, your host for Connecticut Valley Views, and this evening's topic is the Granby Charter Revision, and our guests are Francis J. Brady. He is the chairman of the Granby Charter Revision Commission, and he's a partner at Murtha Colina Attorneys at Law, and Lowell C. Johnson, who is the vice chair of the Granby Charter Revision Commission, and he is the president and owner of the Johnson Gage Company. Thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for this opportunity. Pleasure.
Now, Lowell, I'd like to start out in asking you, the Granby Charter, when was it established and what was its purpose?
Well, let's go back to 1960. 1960 was the year that they started working on the charter. Before, it was just basically first selectman form of government. Town was getting bigger. It was necessary to look at more professional management that the town needed. And so a charter revision was created, and at that time, they dealt with many of the topics we're dealing with today, and I'll mention some of those. But that charter was put together, and we brought in a chief administrative officer, along with the necessary assignments and duties for him to carry out the dictates of the Board of Selectmen. And this was very important. I remember when it happened, the first selectman under the charter was George Tuffin, and it was delightful to see George Tuffin at the Historical Society on Saturday, and he looked just great. I told him that I was going to be here, and he said, "Put in a good word for me." So I'm putting in a good word for him. He's wonderful.
Great.
But it was established, and we are bound to look at the charter every 10 years, or if you will, almost every decade, the way we do it. And we have many assigned responsibilities to make it work. And just think for the minute some of the things that we are involved with. We're involved with dealing with elections, the elective officers, how the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen are structured, as well as the Board of Education, appointed officers, the town manager, and it goes on. This is the roadmap by which this town has to operate.
Now, have you seen, Lowell, over the years, have a lot of sections been added or changed, or has it remained pretty much to the original layout, if you will, or outline?
Having received from the State Library in Connecticut the copies of the charters 1960 and on, it's the language that has changed. Much of the responsibilities have already been started, but they have been modified to meet current times. And as times go on, their changes have to be made. And we are dealing with those at this point to update our processes here in town.
Now, am I correct in saying that there are certain mandates that are set by the state to set up a charter? So in other words, each town adapts to a certain outline set by the state. Is that correct?
Yes, and what was very interesting is we had a state statute guru on the committee, and that was Terry Ann Hahn, who would bring the state statutes in and recite them for us. Right, Fran? Wasn't that fun reading those?
It was a delight.
A delight, yes.
But actually that helps, though, because
it
that gives
does.
you a pattern to follow rather than meandering down the road wondering if you've included everything in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So actually that gives you a good roadmap, as you said.
Yep.
And you said you revisit it every 10 years. Now, is that set by the town, or does the state say that too?
The state says that.
Okay, so that's one of the mandates.
And I think it's a good practical reason. Things change in 10 years.
They change more quickly these days than we think.
Yes, they do.
Could there be, and you might not be able to answer this, and I hate to put your feet to the fire on it, but if there was something, could something be changed in the middle? If you, I mean, I suppose there might be some allowance for that. If
That I don't
some
know,
emergency
Fran.
thing came up, or
It could be, one can commission the Charter Revision Commission between the 10-year intervals.
okay,
So if there was something special, there is a protocol
Some-
where that can be brought together. It'd be a new commission, it would have its own charge. It's very rare. I've certainly not seen it in Granby,
No.
and my colleague has not found anything to that effect, but it's possible.
it's possible.
Yes.
All right. So is that allowance? Well,
Yes.
Fran, continuing on with you, how many people are on the committee, and how is it determined how long they'll serve and how long they remain? I mean, is there a fixed term for each person?
That's a fair question. There are 9 persons on the committee, commission, I should say. And we are appointed by the Board of Selectmen, and our appointments are for the fixed term of this commission. When the work is done, this commission, in effect, dissolves, because there's nothing further to do. Our charge is to develop a revised charter, or at least to evaluate the present charter and make a determination whether it's helpful and appropriate to devise a revised one. And when that work is done, and we expect it'll be done at the very latest in November of this year, then our work and our committee will be dissolved.
So in theory, it's a new group of people every 10 years?
Yes, it can be repeat people.
Could be.
And we have had people who were on the last Charter Revision Commission, Commissioner Johnson, for example, who've repeated, and we're happy to have that history brought
Sure,
forward
sure.
and serve as a jumping off point.
And a natural question to be asked, how are people vetted, I guess I would say? Is the only thing that's a requirement is that they're a Granby resident?
That's an important requirement. Another important requirement, there has to be a balance between the two major parties, the Democratic and the Republican Party. And indeed, the statute requires it to be, in our case, a 5-4 balance. There can be no more than a one-person majority, if you will.
Right.
Now, if there were additional parties in town, the same rule would apply. But let's say there were 3 parties, then one party could not have more than 4 persons on such a commission.
And I would say that if something were, God forbid, that something were to happen to the person, they couldn't continue to serve on the committee, I would assume then that would be a reappointment by the first selectman. of the committee.
That's exactly right, and that person would be drawn from the same political party as the person who either retired, resigned, or otherwise left the commission.
All right.
This did happen. Bud Murtha was an appointed member, and he passed on, and Diane Hernsdorf was appointed in that position. But what it's interesting, as Fran was saying, is that when you look at those that are serving, are they vetted? The answer is really they are vetted with the participation that they have had in this town over the years. Just look at the members. Fran is on the Board of Finance. Annie Hornish ran and was a representative. Dave Russell was the first selectman. Jim Lofink understands the town, his work at the Holcomb Farm. Diane Hernsdorf was a previous first selectman. Terry Ann Hahn was on the previous board. We have 2 brand new people, Melissa Migliosio and Sherry Litchfield. And with those 2 newcomers, it's amazing how they are picking up the education process of what goes on. So it's really, yes, you have to have the town at heart. That's the...
Well, there's got to be a vested interest. I mean, people who are
Yes.
willing to put the time and the
Sure.
effort into it and the understanding of how the town runs.
Yes.
If you don't understand how the town runs, I don't see how you
Yes.
can make recommendations to it.
That is correct.
Or overview a charter, which, as you said, is really the outline and the roadmap for how the town is run. So there does have to be an understanding there. Well, now, having said that, though, I believe that what we're looking at, Fran, is that the public does have an opportunity to participate, because you have public hearings, do you not?
Yes, we do. It's a very important aspect of the entire project. Indeed, state statute requires at least 2 public hearings. And we one at the beginning of the process where we can draw information to help shape our initial ideas, and then one at the end of the process. The one at the end of the process is scheduled for June 1, because we're nearing the end of our draft
Sure.
program. And Commissioner Johnson was creative enough to ask for a public input, not a hearing, but a public input process in the middle. So we had one on Saturday morning. So we've had 2 public hearings already in effect, and a third one coming up shortly. And as I think you know, at the beginning of each meeting, we have an opportunity for the public to present their thoughts on every single occasion, just as if the Board of Selectmen have a public,
Sure.
open public process, we do as well.
I did attend one, and I do know that you have been very kind to anyone, even if they arrived late, that you have given them the opportunity to speak, which I think is very important, the open door policy. After all, this roadmap that you're making really is for the town residents.
Absolutely.
And therefore, they need to be able to participate. So I think the public hearings are very important and they're very key, and that's why we are actually having this discussion tonight, so that we can have people understand it better and that they know how to participate and when they can participate, which I think is critical.
It would be very important, I think, at some point. I have not checked to see just how many residents have indeed obtained a copy of the last charter, but it would be really nice if maybe this would be a Christmas gift, if you will, to all residents in town, that they see how the town operates. It would certainly be enlightening for some.
I think also that enlightening people, the more people understand how it runs, probably the less animosity that is built, because often when you don't understand, there tends to
Good
be
point.
disagreement.
Yes.
And if you do understand, then you know why certain things have been done, or not done, or addressed, or not addressed.
Very well
Absolutely.
put.
Because
Yes.
I think that people, once they understand how it works, then there's a better sense of coordination and cooperation. And I think that always works in any walk of life, in any business,
Yes,
anywhere.
no question.
I think it's very important. Now, Fran, you meet twice a month, is that correct? You have, and when have you been meeting? You've had how many meetings so far, and how often do you meet?
We have had about 19 meetings thus far. We've met every other Wednesday since November. And we are now meeting every week because we're drawing to the end of our first draft, if you will. And so we're going to we met last Wednesday, we're going to meet this Wednesday, which is tomorrow, and then we're meeting on Saturday. And we expect to have a draft by the end of Saturday, which we will then present to the public for their input, and then ultimately after that public meeting to the Board of Selectmen.
All right. And then, as you said, then the final will be in November, when they
Yes.
actually vote.
What will happen is, it's a very good point. What will
Because
happen
you
is the
need
board.
to know the order going. Yeah.
Right. What we will do is present the draft. The Board of Selectmen will then consider our draft, provide suggestions back to the Commission, and the Commission will then make a judgment as to whether to accept or reject the Board of Selectmen's suggestions, report back to the Board of Selectmen, and then they will make a judgment as to whether they will accept the entirety of our proposal, a part of our proposal, or none of our proposal. And then ultimately, the people will have a right to decide in November. The normal November elections will have this matter on the ballot, and all the townspeople, all the voters in Granby will have an opportunity to
Well, this should
say
be
yes
an
or no.
important voting time with the presidential elections.
Absolutely.
I think it's right top of mind. It's an important time to be
Yes.
doing it. People, I think, should show up. I think should have good representation from the town as to how they feel about it.
Just one comment. I want to show, just for the audience, Mr. Chairman, this is what you sent to us the other day as the final markup. When you look at all of this information that has to be digested, read, improved on, it's not quite a novel. It doesn't have a story to it, but it has a lot of direction. And to think for 1 minute that this is going to be hopefully the basis for the next 10 years,
Yes.
it's rather interesting and important.
Well, actually, that's a very good segue to it, Lowell, because I was going to say, when you think about the committee and going through the process that you go through, are you really interpreting the components of it, much like the Supreme Court does when it's looking at an existing law? Or what word would you use? What verb would you use?
Understand.
Understand.
Interpretation is I'm sure a word you could use too, but it's nice to understand. And you understand different ways. You understand what, why, when, and how. Those 4 questions seem to have to be answered when you go through a document like this and you read a paragraph about appointments, you read a paragraph in here about the annual audit. Why is it there? So we're trying to make sure that as we look at the what, where, when, and how, and that kind of thing, that we are presenting to the town in this document the roadmap. That's where we are here. So it's more for understanding than I hopefully interpretation. No, that's
I guess interpretation and understanding to me would be similar. Because you can't decide whether you need to change it if you don't understand what they actually said here.
Okay.
So I think that's where my word interpret, because I think you need to understand. And perhaps what you can do is look back at history and say, well, when that happened, then what did they do about it? But, in other words, what you are doing, though, is you're screening through it and trying to update it to meet the new standards of the town.
Precisely.
Is really what you're doing.
Yes.
And there's a footnote to that. Clarification is the word that also was utilized.
Yes.
For example, in the present charter, there was an inconsistency with respect to the role of the moderator or the role of the appointing authority when the moderator was absent from a key meeting. One portion of the charter said that the body would elect a temporary moderator. Another portion of the charter said that the first selectman would appoint a moderator. So we are in the process of reconciling those two chapters to have a unified approach as to what happens if the moderator is ill or otherwise unavailable at a public meeting. So clarification is an important aspect of the understanding and the interpretation.
Yes.
Chairman
Well-
Brady pointed out a very interesting situation, and it was his plea. Please don't have the town annual meeting elect a moderator that day. That can be a disaster either way. So this is why, as Fran said, we are set up for a continuation of the moderator as an appointed position, and not as elected at that annual meeting.
Right. Have you, this is kind of, it's on track, but have you had any real discussions? I'm kind of going into the weeds here a little bit, but when you have your meetings, because we don't all attend all of them, but have there been some real pushback by anybody where someone really thinks this and the other person, are there strong commitments one way or the other in any of your meetings? Stands or?
That's an interesting question. You mean among the commissioners?
Among the commissioners themselves, yeah. Have you run into that? I won't say there are arguments, but are there people that are very firm about how they think thus and so? Does that come up? Because the moderator is the person who has to sort of mediate the situation.
In my case, it's I speak very favorably of the current process, and I do it. I can trace it a little later as to why I feel that way, and it's not just a personal opinion, but I think the process that I see is the best for the town. The rest say no, it's thrown. That's fine.
Well, let me give you an example, and certainly I share my colleagues' views, but there has been a proposal to separate the Board of Education budget from the town budget.
Yes.
So have two votes on these budgets.
Yes.
And there are members on the commission who felt that might have some validity. But I believe, so there was a little bit of a positive discussion.
Yes.
And I think the clear sense of the commission now is that we will not separate the budgets. We will have a unified budget. We have a single town. All the people have the same interest, that is to advance the community that we're
to the best
happy
for
enough
the town.
to live here, right? So, but that's an issue that the tension, no tension, but there was a positive discussion
Yes.
on both sides of that issue.
Well, I think the reason I ask is, I think our viewers would like to feel there's a sense of honesty, so that there isn't just I'll just go along with the flow, so we all get along and we all get this done.
No.
In other words, if someone felt as though something was really not right, they felt that they could speak up and bring up their point and give thought by the other people. That's the reason I asked the question, because people want to have a feeling that they are represented, that there's a voice out there that may be thinking the same thing they're thinking, not thinking that everybody's just going with the herd, if you will. And that's why I asked the question, and I think that particular one on the division of the budget is probably a very key point, and that's why it was brought up.
Well, and that you make a very good point, that it's necessary and appropriate for the commission to have a real dialogue, not just a rubber stamp. And I assure you that we do have all the commissioners are participating with respect to each matter that comes before them. But that's just one example where there was a difference of opinion.
Well, it's key because the town obviously runs on its funding, and the funding is important to people as to where the money is, how it is spent and where it is spent, and the education budget is so large. I think that's probably why it came up.
The way the commission was set up by Chairman Brady, it was interesting. There are many sections to the charter, and two of us were assigned to different chapters. Two chapters.
Homework.
Homework. This is thesis work. This isn't just homework. And
Got your PhD now?
Yes,
in
yes, I
charter?
feel that. Yes, and it turned out where the assignments and the pairings of those that took various chapters as assigned really had a chance to delve into specifics of their assignment because they could focus, rather as opposed to giving everybody the responsibility
Yes.
to be responsible
Yes.
for everything.
Yes.
And
When you have
that's
a
worked
large
out.
project, it's
Oh,
best to divide
this
it up
was
into
divided up
pieces.
just perfectly.
No, it's a very valid point. So people aren't skimming
No.
and not paying attention. You're actually
No.
quite focused on your
Yes.
area of what you're supposed to be up to
Yes.
snuff on.
And let me just add that
Certainly.
then everybody came together.
Yes.
Just because two commissioners happened to be assigned to Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 didn't mean that they were going to dictate what the result was
Oh, no,
going
of
to be.
course
They would
not.
report their views.
Their views, yep.
And they would be a repository for information about what the interstices of a particular proposal might be. But they were 2 of 9 and would ultimately vote with the others, and sometimes there was some resistance to their views. They were knowledgeable, but their opinions were not necessarily accepted. But I must
No,
say,
it's-
I have to footnote though, this was very collegial. When I say they weren't accepted, I don't mean to imply that there were
No.
any undue tensions. This was a very collegial group, and everybody respected each other's opinions and listened carefully to those opinions.
Well, I think that has to be directed towards the fact that the people are quite carefully chosen so that they will be not only fair and balanced in their thought process, but because they've had experience with the town, they're not only bringing an opinion, they're bringing it based on experience as to what has happened before. If you haven't had the experience, it's kind of hard to comment on how something should be done. So I think it's very valid. And I think it's very good assigning people, and then they become quite
Was.
familiar with it and talk about it in an intelligent fashion, which is always important. Well, having said all of that, there are some things, I think, Lowell, that you feel you've accomplished or added or brought some new things, do you think, to the charter, things that have been accomplished that have not been in the charter before? You might brief us on those.
I, from a personal standpoint, I think it was, from my standpoint, there were there were corrections to the language. Yes, there were. There's the friend talking about the situation of at one point, how do we remove someone from office, if you will, that is not a participating member of, say, Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance. These were some of the things that have been looked at. Do we add alternates to the Planning and Zoning Commission? Things like this came up, and this was more or less, if there was a good idea, let's go with it. There was no one, I don't think, had in these particular instances, had their feet in cement. I think they were willing to move and get along with the process.
Was there anything about emergency funding, something that was?
Yes, and this.
I had heard about that.
Yes, and I'll tell you, Mr. Chairman here is on the Board of Finance. He knows how it has to go through, and the details. It's all yours, sir.
Well, I would just suggest that we did have, of course, over the time in our town, some emergencies, and there's a very lengthy process in order to appropriate funds outside the formal annual budget. And it was suggested that maybe what we should do is have an emergency protocol. And so we have built into this budget a capacity to do that with a cap. It's not as if the Board of Finance and the...
Go wild.
Go wild, exactly. And it would require, if my memory serves, a proposal as it presently stands, 2/3 vote of the Board of Selectmen, a certification from the town manager that there are sufficient funds available
Yes.
in the surplus, and then a 2/3 vote of the Board of Finance. And then even then, there would be a cap on the amount that would be appropriated under this
So is that a
emergency program.
separate column, or is that part of the rainy day fund, or where does the emergency fund reside?
There, right now, it's not an emergency fund, but what we have is
If
a
this
budget
gets
surplus.
passed
We
and so
have
on.
a surplus. The town has a surplus, and we frankly need the surplus in order to keep our a very favorable rating with the rating agencies. And so that surplus, if you will, has been there from time immemorial because the prudent management of the town. But one cannot simply dip into that surplus because there's a new school that has to be built or a new plow that has to be bought. All of those appropriations have to be made at the annual meeting. But if between annual meetings that there is a crisis in the town that really does require emergency expenditures, and we've been blessed in not having very many of those over the years, we have now proposed to adopt a provision that would allow this kind of dipping into the surplus fund. But again, it would require certification from the town manager that there are sufficient funds so that the town is not burdened with undue debt.
It's kind of a 401k. You can only take it out for certain
That's
reasons.
a very good analogy. Exactly.
Only if it's for whatever emergency, getting a house or something. Down payment on a house. All right. Well, having said that, though, I and probably 9/10 of the town have trundled into Geisler's, and there have been one or two gentlemen, I think, at various times who've been out there. They've had a petition. We have 7,700 registered voters, and if they get 10% of those registered voters, they're going to present this petition that they would like to have the budget go to a town vote. Then currently, how it is currently done, where there is a town presentation, and then 2 weeks later, there is a vote in the evening, but a brief presentation again. They would like to go to a full town vote, and that appears to be what that petition is about, and I can stand to be corrected if I'm not correct. Is that?
That's my understanding, and one of the gentlemen has appeared at one of our sessions and reported that he has secured a significant number of names on that petition. The only caveat I would add is that this is, in my judgment, an advisory petition, that it'd be like these people who had signed the petition had appeared before us and said that they subscribe to this particular view. I don't believe it's binding on us. I've not had a session with the town attorney to give me his views, but there is no protocol to require us to do anything other than what's in our best judgment to do. But we would certainly consider any petition by a number of citizens in a serious manner.
In a serious manner. Now, Lowell, having said that, though, you feel there's a proviso, though, for actually exists, that if, in fact, it needed to go to a town vote, it actually already exists.
How much time do we have?
As much as you need.
Okay, let's look at it this way. The way it's presented now, there are safeguards. There are opportunities for those who do not want the current process of voting at the annual meeting to be changed. They want it, let's say, to a machine vote. Look at the obstacles that you have to pass a budget today. You have to have a minimum of 230 people show up, otherwise it goes to meeting. It goes to automatic ballot. Machine vote. The next is you have to have 300, and out of that 300, 2/3 of them have to be for it. In other words, there is a requirement, or there's an odds in favor of the one against the three. Now, when you go back to past history in Granby, it's fascinating. This was put together to get some idea. Since 1999 to 2012, every year, the budget has passed in all but 2 instances at the town meeting. Some of those percentages, 89%, 96%, 96%, 86%. The ones that did not pass were in 2003 and 2009. They went to machine vote. Now, one of them was passed with the first machine vote. The second one, the other one took 2 machine votes. Okay, you have this situation now where it's working now. This process is working the way it is. I believe the town meeting is important to make sure that people understand what's in the budgets. This is a process to educate. I think that if it were just a machine vote, it would be, people wouldn't really get a good understanding of what is in the budget. Now remember, there can be this machine vote for two reasons. Number one, you don't get the sufficient votes for the 2/3 majority. That is the main issue.
You don't even have enough people show up even.
That was my next point.
Sure.
You don't have, so,
Yeah.
so there is that situation. Now, here's what, as I see it coming down, that I see that the opportunity for the whole town to vote on the charter, if they vote down this provision of the current process, that they could vote down at the general election in November. So they have there is that chance for them to participate the way they want. And I just think that the process now, history, you can't, and I think those who fail to remember history are bound to repeat it. I really, this is what you want to make sure that, you want to make sure that you look at this. And 2 out of 18, 19, my goodness, it's...
Well, I was going to comment, personal comments on my, one, I think it's somewhat reflective, people are thinking about it differently. One, because other towns do go to machine vote directly. That may be one, and people are saying maybe we should, quote unquote, update ourselves or whatever. And I think, too, that economic times sometimes drive people to look at how things are done more closely, to make sure it's really dotting all the i's and crossing all the t's, that's giving everybody the opportunity to vote. And I think it's economic times. I don't think it's any judgmental thing on who was on the committee and who's on the commission and what's the current, quote, administration within the town. I don't think it's that so much as people are just very concerned about, they don't want to feel as though anybody's pulling the wool over their eyes, and so therefore they have a stronger opinion than they would during normal times, better economic times. That's just a personal observation.
Well, let me endorse that, and let me advise that the boards, the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Education, have been sensitive to that over the last several years. When this recession started 3 years ago, and the Board of Finance has produced budgets with 0% increases for the last 3 years. This year, I believe the percent increase is probably in the range of 1.5%. Because we're happily doing a little better this year, and we're all optimistic, or at least we're all hopeful that the recession has in fact abated. But there's another point, and I subscribe to what Commissioner Johnson has said. There's another point. Before it even gets to the town meeting, this budget is approved in part by the Board of Selectmen. This budget is approved in part by the Board of Education. And the budget is approved in totality by the Board of Finance. And indeed, the Board of Finance makes adjustments to these proposed budgets. So you have 3 elected boards, elected by the people, who bring their expertise to bear before it's even submitted to the town meeting. And then the town meeting has an opportunity, as Commissioner Johnson pointed out, either because they don't like the budget, they can reject it or go to the referendum, or because they're indifferent and there's not enough there.
Sure.
We don't have the minimal number, and we'll go to referendum. So there are a number of safeguards. Having said all that, as I indicated earlier, we're very sensitive to the wishes of the people, and if there's a petition that's developed and presented in good faith, as we have expected would be, with a substantial number of citizens signing off on it, we are going to pay substantial attention to that petition.
And I trust you will, and this has been very informative. I do thank you, gentlemen, for being with us this evening, and that hopefully for our viewers, we have clarified some points and perhaps educated the viewers a little bit better understanding as to how the process works. So again, I do thank you both.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
We'll look forward to your process going forward, and then successful for everybody in November when the vote comes up.
We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for
indeed.
this opportunity to share this information.
I just want to ask you, actually, one more thing. Any closing comments you personally would like to make before we close this session out about how you feel about anything?
I appreciate being asked to serve on this commission. That's what I can say.
It is quite an honor, actually.
It is.
It really is, because it means that your thought process is important to the town.
And I would
Fran?
simply add that I certainly appreciate Commissioner Johnson being part of this commission, and my other 7 colleagues. It's been a very collaborative effort, and I can assure you, and I can assure the viewers that it's been in the very best interest of the town. We may not get it right, we may not get it perfect, but the efforts that are being devoted are sincere and dedicated to the best interest of the town. And last point, this is a great town, so we want to come up with a great product.
Right, and I do believe that because you gave time and effort to this evening's discussion, and that's all part and parcel of the same thing. So again, I do thank you. And for our viewers, you can see all of our programs on www.ctvalleyviews.com. This is Susan Regan, thanking you for joining me in bringing proof to the people. Our thanks to Windsor Federal Savings for making this program possible. Neighbors helping neighbors since 1936.